So the city of Cape Town is pursuing legal action after two law enforcement officers were taken hostage, we understand, during a protest at the Cape Town station deck. The incident followed a series of altercations between city officials and taxi drivers earlier this week. The tensions began earlier in the day, I think it was on Tuesday, when a driver was apprehended for allegedly driving unlawfully near the Langa turnoff on the N2 inbound. The Mayoral Committee for Safety in the city is JP Smith. He says the driver was pulled over for driving along the shoulder of the road. Let's get the other side of the story. Bring in now the Western Cape SANTACO Chair, Mandla Hermanus, who's with us now via our video link. Mandla, it's great to have you. Thanks very much indeed for making time. Videos of the incident, as I'm sure you're aware, are circulating on social media. But let me get a sense, given how much time has passed since it took place, what you know to have happened.
What we know so far is that the driver indeed drove. He did break some rules of the road, and this was noticed by a law enforcement official who then pulled him over. But he did pull over. He did not try to run away from the cops. He was pulled over and he obliged. And we don't know what led to the altercation between him and the law enforcement official. I think the law enforcement official then wanted to effect an arrest, and he resisted, and then that's where the altercation happened between them. And our concern, first of all, we must state clearly that we always urge our drivers that when they are on the roads, they have to obey the rules of the roads, and it's basic that when you are pulled over or stopped by an officer of the law, you have to oblige. You cannot resist. You have to follow the instruction of the law enforcement officials that are on our public roads. And so we do not encourage drivers to argue with law enforcement officials. But we are also concerned when there's a sense that law enforcement officials are using excessive force in an attempt to arrest drivers, to a point where one can be choked until one is unconscious, which could have led to his death.
Sure, fair enough. And of course, this is not a new concern. We've heard in the past, SANTACO, specifically in the Western Cape, locking horns with city officials. We'll speak a bit more about your relationship, especially after this incident. But I just want to understand again how we went from a possible arrest to him resisting potentially, and then two city officials being taken hostage. Is that a fact you contest as SANTACO? I mean, is that what you also understand to have happened?
These are two unrelated incidents, but they happened on the same day. One incident, the driver was then strangled by the two law enforcement officials until he passed out. He was unconscious, to a point where the spectators and passengers actually assumed that he had been killed. And that's when the video circulated that a driver has been killed. But it turned out, no, he had been unconscious, but he did regain consciousness and then was subsequently arrested. And then following that, the circulation of the video then led to drivers now at the station deck being agitated. And then they formed a blockade. They would not allow vehicles to move in or out of the station deck in Cape Town. That's a separate incident. And I am not aware of cops being held hostage. The videos we have seen is cops arresting drivers, because there was a second driver after station deck who was again detained by law enforcement officials. And that driver was also beaten up during that.
We've been here before, as I mentioned earlier, and I wonder how much of an agreement, a formal agreement about how to deal with these things emerged the last time. Yes, the issues were different. When things simmered over, some taxi drivers were saying that there's an excessive application of the law with the impounding of their vehicles. There were huge blockades taking place. And, at some stage were really concerned about the safety of passengers. How much of those talks that sorted out that issue are giving guidance now to how to deal with this particular instance?
Look, the biggest challenge that we are having, when the first incident surfaced yesterday, the first thing I did was to contact the mayor of Cape Town to say there is this video that is circulating that suggests that a driver might have been killed by law enforcement officials. And then he said he would call the senior executives and would get to the bottom of it immediately. And then I subsequently contacted him to say, it turns out the driver is alive, and we were all relieved that the driver was alive. But there hasn't been communication to say, okay, we need to sit down around the table and see how do we deal with this. The only communication we have is via social media, when we just read statements by JP Smith condoning the acts of the law enforcement officials, not even trying to say we need to bring this to an end. What we get from him is a sense that actually city law enforcement officials are encouraged to fall down very hard on our taxi drivers, even if it means they use excessive force, which we believe is not correct. We haven't had civil communication between us and the city other than what they will post on Facebook or TikTok.
Sure. And where do you think, Mandla, that leaves your relationship with the city in a context where you've got a choppy history?
It's disheartening and it's disappointing, because we are doing everything as the leadership in the province to try and formalize the taxi industry. We've got good working relationships with the officials within the city of Cape Town, where we are working on projects that will seek to address exactly these kinds of things. We've got a whole lot of things that we are working on, which will start to bear fruit before the end of this year in terms of using technology to monitor our vehicles, having control rooms. But now the challenge is when the city is not interested, it's very disappointing for us.
All right, Mandla Hermanus, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Just for the record, by the way, we did reach out to the City of Cape Town's law enforcement officials to give their side of the story. They're yet to respond at the time of this broadcast. Mandla Hermanus, though, is SANTACO's Western Cape Chairperson, as we try to get a sense of what took place. Once again, Mandla, thanks very much indeed.